All right, folks, you are listening to the Yishai Fleischer Show, and we are live, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are. Situation out here is definitely complex, and there's a lot of narratives going around about what the motivations of the terrorists are, about how Israel should react. What is Israel's role in kind of global affairs? What about its relationship to the United States? And even this Ukraine thing, does it somehow project onto how Israel should be reacting or how it sees itself? My guest this half is my friend and also author of this book that I'm putting on you could see it right now on the screen. If you're watching, if you're listening, it's Gidon Ariel. He's the author of this book, which is called Broken Values. Broken Values, How the Democratic Party Platform Betrays Its Followers and America. So he's an expert in America stuff as well. He's the president of the Jerusalem Washington Center, contributing editor at Midah magazine, but also at Israel's leading newspaper, Israel Hayom, and often appears on Israel's Fox News type channel, which is called Channel 14. Gidon Ariel, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Yishai. Gideon Israel.
That's right. What did I say? Didn't I say that?
Gideon Ariel. No, he's also
Ariel's a good friend of mine, but there's two Gidons. The Gidon Ariel is in South Hebron Hills, but you're in Samaria, and you're author of this Gidon Israel of Broken Values. And those are actually those are, you think about it, the word Ariel is actually the name for the temple, and Israel is the name for the Jewish people, so you can understand where I would confuse those. But you are certainly Gidon Israel and a good friend of mine. Listen, Gidon, it's not really time for pleasantries so much right now, is it? We're in a terror wave, and that terror wave just struck. I shot from here, from where I'm sitting right now at Tzomet Elazar, the Elazar Junction, and a Palestinian terrorist came onto the bus with a screwdriver, and just walked onto the bus, started stabbing somebody, the first person that he saw. He didn't even sit down. He just started stabbing immediately. Some people are saying that we should not be letting on Arabs onto Israeli buses right now. And he was shot dead. The victim was seriously injured and is in surgery right now. But this is an example of the as I was in synagogue praying. I was in the middle of the 18 benedictions Shemona Esrei prayer, and I had to. And my wife was calling, so I hung up on her because I'm in the middle of a prayer that you're not supposed to answer. But she called a second time. I realized that this was something was going on, and she was nervous and scared. And I thought to myself, it could also be reflective of something dangerous. And right now, because there's pikuach nefesh, so I had to stop my prayer, and I picked it up. And that's a very rare thing that we don't do. But I thought it could be pikuach nefesh, and she indeed reported that she was close to this situation. She was scared about it. So that is the atmosphere here in Israel. We're in this wave of terror, and it is striking at us. And you told me right before the show that one of the ministers had a very old take, and maybe a misconstrued take on what the motivations of the terrorists are. So let's start with that.
Right. So I hadn't seen what he said, but I saw a tweet of a friend of mine who sort of responded to something that he had said. He said, he said, Nachman, people who are hungry don't, shoot a father between the eyes, looking into, his sights on an M16. And then
wait a minute. Who is the minister, and what did he say?
So the minister is Nachman Shai. He's the diaspora affairs minister, and he mentioned, among other things, that when people don't have food or and they don't have any hope, they turn to terror. Kind of reminiscent of like 7 or 8 years ago during the Obama administration, when the State Department spokesman said something to the extent of, ISIS people need jobs.
Right.
And if they have jobs, they won't be terrorists. But the truth is that, while poor people may turn to terror, poor Arabs, but that's not necessarily the reason. And there's so many reasons why they might be involved in terrorist attacks. But it made me think to, something written in Exodus where Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, he says, let my people go so we can, serve our God in the desert. And then Pharaoh says to him, until now I was giving you, materials to make bricks, but now I'm not going to give you any materials, and you're going to have to make bricks you're going to have to find the materials to make bricks on your own. And once you're occupied with this, you'll stop dealing with these falsehoods, these ideas about, let's, a God to serve and worshiping God in the desert. And the message is that when it's actually when people have time on their hands, it's actually when, there's an upper class, there's an intelligentsia. It's actually at those times where people have these ideas of, nationalism and national liberation and so forth. So it's really the opposite. That's when actually there's time to create I guess, an environment for the terror attacks, and not when everybody's just hungry for food. I mean, I know, and I mean, maybe you can also have felt it in yourself, but when people are stressed financially, you have no time to think about these things.
Right. So basically, in simple terms, the theory that Palestinian poverty is the cause of terror has been debunked. And it's so clearly not that. If you go around the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority, you see that there's actually tremendous amount of wealth and fancy cars and fancy homes. And this what's behind Nachman Shai's statement is a way to self-blame, to blame ourselves for some kind of subjugation or invented, hurt, and thereby cast the blame of a lack of goodwill or a lack of appeasement and a lack of opportunity, instead of saying what it really is, which is, this is the magic word here, which is, it's a jihad, it's an ideology of anti-Israelism and world domination. And in fact, two of the big three attacks that Israel's faced in the last week have been by members of self-proclaimed members of ISIS. And so ISIS is not about fighting poverty. It's a jihadist, ideologically jihadist movement. And so right now, Tzvi writes, as one of the comments, he writes, are people still believing in this BS? Meaning to say, he's saying, like, do people really believe that it's a result of poverty? Nachman Shai, it's not that he even believes that. He just wants to blame. Coming from the Israeli left, he wants to blame suppression of Arabs instead of realizing that actually we need to be suppressing the jihad even more.
Right. This was like this whole conversation was kind of thinking, okay, what do we do in the future? And I think, and then it was, people, I guess other ministers were saying we need to stop letting people in from, I guess, I don't know if it was Gaza or wherever, maybe Judea and Samaria, to work in, what we know as pre-1967 Israel. So that's where this came from. But it's definitely people still ascribe to this stuff. I mean, what people think, for many years doesn't go away easily. It just doesn't.
Right. And it also fits their narrative, which is, you see, if we could only be nicer, if we could also give more, then the other side will be appeased. It's really, if you think about it, it's just an intellectual step before appeasement. It's there to set up appeasement. You see, you haven't given them enough. You haven't given them enough work opportunities. If you do that, things will be better for them. The actual wealth situation, the actual food situation, the actual welfare of Arabs and living in under the Palestinian Authority, that's not taken into account. It's just a kind of set where you're like, in your heart, you're like, I feel bad. It must be me. It's a little bit of a battered wife syndrome thing, and it's also, of course, the bigger element of it. The lion's share is these are people who don't want to act with Jewish power. They don't want to act with justified violence. They want to stay away from that. Their setting inside is not one that could strike at bad dudes, and so therefore they find fault in themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's just also important to remember one of the other ideas or arguments that come from that happens always after these type of attacks is people say, oh, it's 5%, oh, it's only the overwhelming majority want to live,
Are not with it.
and the truth is, but that really doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter for a few reasons. First of all, if let's say we say there's about a million and a half Arabs living in Judea and Samaria. So that means if you have merely 3% are with us, that means you have 45,000 people ready to commit terrorist attacks, and that's a pretty serious amount of people to deal with on a daily basis. I'm sure it's taxing for for the GSS, our FBI, and so even if you have a very small percentage, it's still a major threat. And also, as we know in societies, the people who control what happens are that small minority that's vocal. They're the ones who have
Right.
political power. They're the ones who run for office. So
But that's
it's
also that's also a narrative these days that's out there, which is it's a minority. Look, it's just not such a minority. I'm sorry. Like you know what I mean? I have a big heart for Arabs who want to live normally alongside Israel. But at the same time, like to deny the breadth and width of the jihadist ideology in Arab society, especially in Palestinian Arab society, is really to close your eyes. You could see it in the major rallies. You could see it in the channels that they put out. You could see it. Now, I know many Arabs who detest the jihad, but they also admit to me that their society is rampantly infiltrated by these kind of ideas, including in, for example, Hebron. It's a Hamas city. And I was just talking with an Arab. He said to me, "Yeah, there's tons of Hamas here. There's not a lot of ISIS, but there's Hamas, and that's one step away." And if you watch PATV, you're like, "This is brainwashing 24/7." It's crazy stuff. Now, one of the things that we love on the show is to hear from people around the world. So please leave me a message right now if you're watching live on one of the many platforms. And we have just to make a great segue is a comment from Igolnikov Rosa, who writes, Russian clean Ukrainian land from Nazi and criminals for the glory of God, which is one of it's the kind of Russian narrative, or at least the Putin or Kremlin narrative, which is there's Nazis, there's a denazification that's happening in Ukraine now, and that's what Russia is doing. It's cleaning Ukrainian land from Nazi and criminals, and here for the glory of God. Very interesting, a very nationalistic and religious language. Certainly, that is not the dominant paradigm narrative that's out there. The dominant narrative is that Russia has entered into a land conquest unilaterally, an attack on a sovereign state and on the land, the sovereign land of a different state, and have also committed atrocities, including places like Mariupol, and at the same time, not even being a very effective army, while the Ukrainian resistance is being very effective. And that is the kind of narrative that's out there. Here in Israel, we may choose one of those narratives or we may not. I personally believe that Israel should stay as neutral as possible, except for humanitarian aid in this conflict. I don't think that when two bears are fighting, you have to get in between those bears. But at the same time, do you agree with that? And do you think that there are useful lessons to us from the Russia-Ukraine conflict that we could use here?
Well, I think there are so many lessons that we can learn. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about this morning. I've been thinking about the lessons for the past few weeks, but one thing that just came to me this morning is that, like, um, when there's real conflict in the world, like a real war, like it sort of cuts down the Palestinian Israeli conflict. It cuts it down to size. And because I was just thinking, when did the whole peace process really begin, or it was the 90s after the Cold War when the world was relatively silent, and they have the ability to focus on these small conflicts in various areas of the world, and then suddenly the Oslo Accords are signed. But when you have these big wars, it really cuts our conflict down to size.
Okay, so one lesson you're saying is that the Middle East conflict, while making a lot of headlines, is really not the number one conflict in the world. There's much bigger
The
issues, and
the
so
Yeah, the
go ahead.
Palestinian Israel, not the broader Iran issue,
Right.
but
Okay. So the Israel, the Arab-Israeli conflict on the in this local level, on the so-called Palestine level, is much smaller than than fits the amount of coverage that it gets, and a war like this overshadows it. Of course, this one of the jokes that's going around is that Putin also killed COVID, right? Because the minute
right,
the war
he
started,
did,
COVID
he
just
did,
died, right?
he did. He said, I think one of the people that must be most angry is Dr. Anthony Fauci, because suddenly he's not the main star.
Right. Right. That's right. He was
So,
he was he was replaced. That's right. And so, by the way, have you noticed that there were like three great crises that took up all of our mental time, or of our media time? It was Trump, the person.
right,
Then immediately it was to bring him down and to kind of replace him. It was COVID, the disease, and now it's Russia, the war, Russia, Ukraine, the
right,
war. And I think to myself, like, gosh, it's either that the press is really lucky that there's always some kind of uh, very very important media event happening, or boy, do they create it a little bit in order to puff up their own sales. You have to sell a newspaper, you got to get a podcast to listen to. So all right, before we go on, I just want to say that Robert uh writes, watching and listening to you from Mexico, Yishai. I stand with Israel. Thank you so much, Roberto. Thank you so much, and it's great to hear from you, and it strengthens us, and we need people to stand with us right now in this tough time. All right, get on Israel. What else do you think is a
so
lesson?
so I think for Israel, the lesson is, another lesson is that we need to learn for ourselves is how quickly people jumped to the Ukrainian side, and supported them because they're the weak side. Now, I'm not, without even expressing an opinion of who's right and who's not, but it was just like people had just finished, becoming COVID experts, and then they were supply chain experts, then they were economic inflation experts, and now they're suddenly, like Ukraine experts, and it's scary, especially for us, because right now we're considered the more powerful, power and side in the Middle East vis-a-vis the Palestinians, and it's scary how just like everybody's seen, Ukrainian flags on their Facebook, on Twitter, taking pictures without even actually knowing the history, knowing anything.
Right.
So that's
So what's
scary
the
for us.
so what's the lesson there? What's the
the,
lesson?
le- the lesson is that we need to be prepared, that if we are ever in a serious conflict, with our neighbors who may be perceived as more weak than we are, we need to know that the public is going to jump, the public, worldwide opinion is going to jump to their side, at least the vocal worldwide opinion, which segues into another lesson, is that we better be ready to finish the war very quickly,
Right.
because in the with social media and with pictures, it's like the battlefield is being broadcast live to us. You have these like Telegram channels in Ukraine where you see people shooting RPGs. You see the battlefield. So we need to be ready to finish wars very quickly, because public opinion will turn on us quickly.
Right. But on the other hand, interestingly enough, I was thinking about this. Look at the Russia war. There's another side to it, which is okay, you guys think it's a quick war. I'm going to draw it out, and I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm not like so afraid of what you say, kind of. One could say that Putin's operation continues and has not been stopped, even though there's been a lot of pressure. But in any case, I certainly agree with you that
But
things are being watched. I guess I guess I guess it was very scary for me to realize that this global financial boycott that went on to Russia is now a oiled tool ready to strike against Israel when they don't like what we're doing.
exactly, and not only that, but how fast it all happened. It all happened so quickly. It happened within like within like 2 weeks. And it wasn't only countries sanctioning, it was also the private sector. And but Russia's continuing because I think they've prepared for this situation for many, many years.
Right.
And therefore they're not so reliant on foreign currencies. And so, but we're a much smaller country. We're not as powerful as Russia. We don't have, um, all the resources or whatever that they have. So I think that's why it's important for us that if we're going to be in a conflict, that the sanctions are going to start hitting after a week or 2 weeks. We need to be, we need to be after, you know.
Right. So one I think a lesson there is to definitely have more reserves and more independence in terms of everything from the missiles that you have to the water that you make to food that you have. And there's in the let's call it in the dark sphere of the internet, in the conspiracy sphere, there's a lot of concerns about food shortages coming up. And I have no idea if that's true or not, but I could say that that there's this one of the lessons, I guess, for Israel is be ready to be more independent, if indeed independent, more self-reliant. I think in case you need to act some way. Another thing is also one of the other ways of saying self-reliance is to diversify your reliance. I spoke with Mordechai Kedar, Professor Kedar. He told me one of the big problems in Israel is that we're too reliant on U.S. arms, and that we should be buying arms from China and from Russia to be able to say, look, if you know what I mean, you make jets, fine, but we also know how to fly Russian jets or our own jets if we would make them. But certainly we have a way to, or Chinese jets. We are diversified and therefore non-reliant on your particular opinion at any particular time.
I think I mean, it's a good idea, but I think it's a bit, it's more easily said than done. I mean, obviously we are diversified in the sense that our tanks, and for this is when I spoke to experts, our tanks we produce, manufacture them at a loss, because we never want to be dependent on other countries for replacement parts, or in times of war. We've felt that on our skin in previous wars. So tanks, Israel makes even at a loss.
Right.
But I mean, once,
But
even if the
jets we
United
don't make anymore, and that's famously because the Americans kind of shut down that program.
So the right, I actually, when I had a talk, maybe 10, 15 years ago with Moshe Aaron's, blessed memory, who was the defense minister at the time that the program was canceled, was that he actually said that he told me that it was the Israeli generals who had went to lobby American officials to close down the program. So it was actually
Mm.
sort of pressure coming from us to them, which came back to us. But from what I've talked to people, generals in the Air Force, that America makes the best planes. There's this, there's no one that even comes close. So, and I think in any weapon system we have, we're dependent on those people for the spare parts. So it doesn't matter from who you buy from. I think it just means that we need to be, with what we have, whether it's food or whether it's weapons. We need to have weapons for more than a 5-day war. We need to make sure that at least we can go 2-3 weeks fighting, and not need spare parts, or we need to make sure that we have the resources we need, so we're not begging countries after 2 weeks for more shipments if they decide. I think it's
Right.
I think also with what we saw, in America with various, internet, Apple and whoever, deplatforming various, websites. I hope that our cloud apparatus is not dependent on the goodwill of the big tech companies in America, who may just be, ready to shut it off after a few days of war
Right.
and some bad pictures from Gaza.
Mm. That's a very good point. Because, like, for example, when the big tech folks didn't like a whole other platform that was sitting on the Amazon cloud, they just declouded them. They there was more than just a platform. They just got rid of the whole infrastructure underneath the platform. And you're absolutely right. A lot of stuff depends on that stuff. A lot of services depend on that, and it's an interconnected world for good. there's also a bad element to that, and that's something to be very careful about. Okay, any other lessons from the Ukraine war for us?
Yeah, and this, yeah, there's a few, and they all, coalesce around the topic of, the ideas, of can there be a two-state solution? And I think did you notice how, the Russian army advanced more than the width of pre-1967 Israel in just a few hours? I
Right.
mean, so like territory matters. Territory matters. You need territorial depth, and when you go to the eastern part of the Shomron, overlooking the Jordan Valley, you realize that that when you control the highlands, you can stop an invasion. I mean, and it's like, in this era of, oh, missiles go over mountains, and oh, we can have, geeks, on disabling missile systems. No, we see from this war, high ground matters, territory matters, tanks matter, foot
Hmm.
soldiers matter. Someone sent me something. They said, because people are saying, oh, we see that the Russian army is not as strong as we thought it was. And there was someone who sent me something where the gist was that basically the Russian army, or Russia, had actually spent all their money on these, whether it be nuclear weapons and these, hypersonic missiles, but in terms of their tanks, they don't even have GPS, or, they don't have the proper training, they don't have the proper supply chain. So, what we see is that all these things matters. Like people, who want to think that all this, the history of wars is behind us. It's not. These things still matter in our 21st century.
That's a very, very good point. It's a very good point. Roberto writes, interesting thing. He writes, there's been a civil war in Ukraine since 2014 that the West and the MSM are not talking about because it was provoked by the USA and NATO. Their narrative is to put all the blame on Putin. And that is, that is definitely the counter narrative. That America, the U.S., provoked Russia into this war, told Ukraine that they're going to be NATO members and EU members, and kind of like offered them this thing, and then in the midst of the war said, "Oh yeah, we we didn't mean that." And basically, it's like, oh, so what was the whole threat against the Putin's Russia, that Ukraine would become part of NATO? Like that was really a paper tiger, but like or a red herring, and really was a trap to get you into this morass and to crush. But you know what's more interesting to me, even more than that, is the economics of it all. There's so much economics behind this Russia war. And there's so much economic battling out there today for resources,
Right.
for technology, to be able to financial technology, financial tech, like the Swift thing, um, gas and oil lines going to Europe. No, now they're going to go to China. Where's this stuff going to go? There's also a lot of economics. Do you think there's any like economic? We talked a little bit about being independent. Is there any other economic lessons you think that I remember at the beginning of the war, they said Germany's not going to cut Russia out because Germany needs Russian gas and oil, but somehow they changed tax on that. So what do you think the economic lessons for Israel from the Russia Ukraine war is?
Well, I mean, certainly with all our, with what we're doing with natural gas in the Mediterranean, we need to, keep drilling and keep exploring, because we just can't imagine that the world that we lived in without so many wars will just continue. I mean, from the time of Adam and Eve, there have been wars. I mean, some people say, well, why do wars happen? That should never be the question. The question should be, why do actually people live in peace? Because our history is only filled with wars. You should say, what were those conditions that allowed for two countries to live in peace?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that certainly in terms of energy independence, and
But I think also being a provider and not just a client is a very important thing. What about the issue of like nationalism? One of the things that
By
I'm
the way, I just want to
go
add
ahead.
one more thing. I think that's one thing that former Prime Minister Netanyahu understood is he sort of understood how to leverage Israel's strengths, whether it be various tech platforms where he could go to various nations and say, listen, we'll give you this platform if you do this for us.
Right.
And I think obviously we're not going to be 100% strong in all areas. I think it's important that we have leadership that really knows how to leverage those things. So that's really most important. That's a very important thing.
What about what about nationalism as an atmosphere? Like, one of the things that I've liked about this war, quote unquote, liked about this war, is that there's more of a sense of, okay, wave the flag, protect your borders. This is ours, and not yours, and I won't let you take it over. And everybody wants to use that to their advantage. The Palestinians, I've driving on the road, I see Ukrainian flags in some Palestinian areas. I would like to say no. In that sense, we should be like, not that we should be pro Ukraine or pro Russia, but we should just be like, good. Nationalism is a good thing. Defend your land, defend your home. Know that it's yours, and know that somebody else is trying to take it over, and he could be doing it in sneaky ways or non-sneaky ways. But a sense of healthy nationalism and a sense of defense and self-defense, which is linked to nationalism, is an atmospheric. Now, maybe partially that's also causing some of the terrorism that we see rise up now, because of the kind of general sense of nationalism. The other side gets it as well. But can we use that to our advantage, do you think?
I think we can. I think we can, and in terms of the way we educate our children, and the way we just talk, the way we talk, amongst ourselves, that when you believe in where you are living, when you believe in the history of your nation, when you believe,
Get on, if I can cut you off for just a second.
sure.
Just as we're talking, I got this message on our feed from Muhammad Shalabi, and he writes, "Free Palestine." 2 words, "Free Palestine." What he really means is he could say "Free Palestine" because that's a nice liberal word. What he means is get rid of Israel, destroy Israel, right? Get rid of Israel altogether. And
Right.
he adds another thing. He says, "May the Mahdi come soon, inshallah, and free Palestine," which means may the Mashiach, may the Messiah come soon, the Muslim Messiah, which is actually a Shiite type of Messiah, come soon with the help of God, and free Palestine. Okay, so you see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's an atmosphere of nationalism. It means, like, and he adds, yes, destroy Israel, and I respect that. Okay, good. There it is. I put it up on the screen. It's from my Facebook, from my YouTube channel, that's going
Right.
live right now. I respect that. You're saying destroy Israel. I'm here to fight you. One of the things that I wrote on Twitter today, and I saw that it caught a little traction, I said, one of the good things about this latest wave of terror is that when the Amalekites come out to kill Jews, just like in Megillat Esther, it's good, because then you spot them, you see them, they come out of their hiding, they come out of their little dark places where they're working in your hospital, and they're working in your hotel, and they're working all kinds of places, and they have a nice face on. No, here they put on their real face, they show their real face, and they come out and they show their jihad. So I'm happy when a person like Muhammad says, yes, destroy Israel, because I prefer that than the fraudulent cover-up face. And I say, let's have an open conflict. Better that way than a situation in which they are preparing their arms and training and training and training. And he says, interesting. Muhammad adds, he says, "I like the real Jews, not the Zionists, but I promise we will expel you from the lands." And I say to you, Muhammad, thank you for your your warlike commentary. I respect it, and I say to you that we will evict jihadists like yourself from our lands, and may Allah decide who wins. Let's fight it out, and let Allah decide it all the way. And meaning to say, okay, that's what I was saying to you. There's an atmosphere of nationalism, and it's coming out right now. Now somebody might say, let's not have nationalism and just all get along. I can understand that theory in this time, but you can't do that when somebody's trying to take your land from within, and that is we have a conflict, we have a war. We could believe that there is no war, but maybe it's better to actually deal with the situation instead of sublimate it. What do you think?
Well, I think, well, I mean, I know that thing you mentioned, that sort of argument. Well, when you have nationalism, that leads to wars. But I think the healthy nationalism that you and I think both believe in is that nationalism where people are you're part of a citizenry, you're part of a people who live in a certain territory with a history together,
Right.
and you have a government puts that puts the people in their territory first, and ensures that there's defense, ensures that there's all that the citizenry needs. And I think that's a healthy nationalism
and
that
and
that
it's and let me add to that. Healthy nationalism is that and it's very important for me to say this right now, because I may have come out sounding kind of like willing to go into conflict. Yeah, willing to go into conflict with bad guys, but also willing to cooperate with good guys. Nationalism on an Israeli level means that we would be a strong Jewish state, and we respect the nationalism of our Arab cousins and their strong states around us, and we should be cooperating for a better region, and including allowing the people who respect and love Israel, may they be Druze or Christian Arabs or Muslim Arabs or anybody else who wants to live here in respect of the law and respect of the Jewish state. That's a wonderful cooperation that could happen. And I'm the number one believer in the Abraham Accords, because it's not a racist thing. It's understanding that a tribe is trying to take away your land. You stop them, but on the broader region, we have opportunity for cooperation. Muslim Arabs in Hebron tell me all the time. They're like, you guys are not taking care of business. You allow people like Muhammad Shalabi, who's hateful, who's anti-Jewish. He says here, he writes, the Jewish state will fall. You guys allow them to run amok instead of crushing them. And those very same people are the ones that destroy Muslim society and Arab society from within, because you're not willing to take care of business.
Yeah, I mean, that's unfortunately, something in Israel. We haven't won wars in many years. We've gone in the past 15 years. We've had, I think, 3 or 4 operations in Gaza. I mean, this is a 20 by 4 mile area. It's something that we should, have, been able to take care of easily. But unfortunately, we've been in there sometimes 30 days, 50 days, and without a clear victory. And part of that inability to actually defeat and crush the problem is that we don't believe enough in what we're doing, or the people and the leadership, or the people who are commanding our troops don't believe enough in our in our, what we call in Israel, tzidkat derech, our righteous a cause, and therefore IDF soldiers are put secondary to Palestinian civilians, and so forth. So, but going back to your point, I think the nationalism, I think that the region we live in is so dangerous, that it's so important that we always be educating our children and educating ourselves in the fact that, yes, we do belong here. This land is part of our history, the Bible and everything that goes with it, because you need that healthy understanding, healthy belief, if you're going to survive here. What Zelensky said, he could have left the country, like the Afghani president. He could have, so many other leaders who flee with their money. It's admirable, the fact that he said, I'm staying here. And even in the face of one of the strongest armies in the world, he said, I'm staying here, no matter what, and I think we can learn from that. But that only comes, that ability to say such a thing in a time of war, comes from a person's healthy understanding of their belonging to a certain nation, and belonging to a certain area.
Well, I just want to say that Muhammad Shalabi has just written the most perfect phrase in order to finish up this part of the program, to dovetail with what you were just saying. He says, the Ummah will come back stronger, inshallah. Let me translate that. The nation will come back stronger with the help of God. And he didn't say which nation, and I agree with you, Muhammad. The nation of Israel will come back stronger, inshallah, with the help of God. May the good side of the Arab nation also, and the Muslim nation also rise up again. Not this jihadist conquest death cult thing that's going on from the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, but rather, a cooperative, an honorable, guest accepting, noble Arab, regional trait should come back, and so that we could also have, with that Arab nobility with the Jewish tribe that's here in our ancestral homeland, God-given ancestral homeland, sons of Abraham, sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah, and that's a future for nationalism, and indeed the Ummah will come back stronger, inshallah. Israel, we have gone quite a bit of time, 40 minutes, so I really want to thank you. There are many important lessons here. And please write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com, if you have any questions for Gidon. Check out his book, which is on Amazon, called Broken Values, How the Democratic Party Platform Betrays Its Followers and America. And this is written by a very smart Jew from the land of Israel.
There's a special paragraph special chapter on Israel. And it's really about how the left has taken over the Democratic Party in the last 30 years. So it's, if you want to understand the left, it's a great book.
Which is really a broader question about how the left left thinking is infiltrating normative society. I think that's the bigger question.
What happens there, what happens in America eventually gets to Israel a few years later, and many other places in the world.
Gidon Israel, thank you so much for joining me today, and may we see Hashem Oz Lamoiten. May God give strength to His people. Hashem Yivarech Damo V'Shalom. May God give His people peace. Thank you very much for being with us.
With you.
All right, folks, you are listening to the Yishai Fleisher Show, and more great stuff is on the way. We'll do a little, if you're listening on the podcast, we'll do a little table Torah to talk about some important strength for how we move forward with this week's Torah portion for all the folks around the world, Jews and non-Jews, who want to hear what the Torah portion is and what it's about that's coming up right now. And just one last phrase from Muhammad, who says, "I promise Palestine will be for Muslims only." Listen, let's not waste too much time talking. Let's see. We'll see. It seems to me that Allah is bringing the Jewish people back. It's in the Quran. We are back in our land. We have defeated you in miraculous wars over and over again because Allah is with us. And your big talk is nothing, because in the end, what are you doing? You're killing a few people against the Islamic values. And so what? And so what? And you're a murderer. And what has that given you? Has Israel gone away? No, we're even bigger and stronger. So inshallah, with the help of God, we will continue to be big and strong. More great stuff is on the way. Thanks so much for joining me. Write me an email, yishai@yishaifleisher.com. And God bless you, and shalom.